Welcome, everyone, to the Courageous Truth Podcast. As always, I am honored that you have chosen to spend a little bit of time with me today. Something very important I want to talk about. I think that this is a talking point, a debate point in our culture among the citizenry here in the United States, and that is, what does it mean to be a citizen? But before we get into that, I want to share a scripture out of Psalms 33:12. It says this: "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." In other words, this is a promise that there will be blessings of liberty and prosperity and peace to those nations who recognize the one true God, as their Savior, as their King over their nation. God is a God of nations. And our world is a world of nations, and nations divide good ideas, as Charlie Kirk said, from bad ideas, good practices from bad practices, good procedures and policies from bad procedures and policies. And that's the mindset we need to take into this episode. But first, I just want to say thank you for all the support on the videos. I'm really trying to build up this YouTube platform. Thank you for everyone who has subscribed. I'm just about at 400 subscribers. Thank you so much. Continue to subscribe. Right now, just hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave me a comment. Let's create a dialogue, because through the comment section is where I'm going to find out the content and the topics that you want to hear from my heart, and the discussions that you want to have. See, this platform has very little to do with me and so much to do with you, and empowering and equipping you to use your voice into culture, into society, and speak some sense into the world that we live in today. Thank you so very much. Like I said, follow me on TikTok. It's one of my biggest platforms. You can just go right here to this handle right here and follow me on TikTok. And like I said before, thank you so very much. This topic is a hot button topic. It's a hot button issue. And I want to talk today about the honor of American citizenship. And I want to look at what that truly means and who exactly is a citizen. And like I said, there's a huge debate about who gets citizenship rights and who the Constitution applies to. Half the country believes that the Constitution applies to only citizens. Only those who are rightful citizens of the United States does this Constitution cover. The other half believes it applies to anybody. Anybody who is living on our soil, anybody who's within the proximity of our nation. And typically those people don't even believe in borders. They're kind of these globalists that believe that no human being is illegal, but only when it comes to immigrants, okay? Donald Trump, of course, would be illegal because he's a 34-time felon, and January 6ers, of course, would be illegal because they are felons and violent aggressors and all that, but I digress. I want to take a moment, and I'm going to read right out of the United States Constitution. This is my pocket Constitution. It's probably flipped backwards because of the camera angle, but I think everybody should carry one of these. I got this from Patriot Academy. They sent it out for just a few dollars. I'm going to read right out of it. I'm going to read the preamble to the United States Constitution, and we're going to break that down. And I think that this is foundational. Reading I think the preamble is foundational to everything we read after it. So the preamble is the introduction to the Constitution. This is what it says. I had to memorize it in 7th grade. I still have to read it. Anyway, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, what is a constitution? What is a constitution? Basically, it's a body of fundamental and founding principles or established precedents to which a state, organization, or nation is governed. This Constitution is the policies and procedures and principles to which the United States is governed by. The first words of the preamble of the Constitution says what? We, the people. This is not a constitution that was given to our elected officials or our bureaucratic representatives. This is a constitution for the people. Let's break this down. What does the Constitution, what does the preamble promise in the Constitution? This is so important. Number one, to establish justice, that there will be law and order, that there will be cultural accountability, and that people will be treated with fairness in all matters of state. Justice is important, to establish what justice is and then keep it steady and consistent throughout all the generations. Next, it says to ensure domestic tranquility. In other words, peace. That we would live peacefully amongst one another, that we would live peacefully amongst our neighbors, our friends, our family, and those that live around us in differing parts of the nation. And I think that when we all gather around the Constitution, and the Constitution is the framework for how we live and do business and govern ourselves, there will be peace. We find conflict when we move away from our founding principles, and a lot of times we find conflict when our governing officials create issues amongst the states, amongst the nation, and they get greedy and they begin to do things against the Constitution, and the people have to take sides based upon an ideology. But we are promised and we are pursuing a lifestyle free from tension, friction, and unrest. We get the citizenry gets unrest, and we get tense, and we get violent, and we get agitated when things are not stable. Next, it promises to provide for the common defense. In other words, that we are going to protect our nation from outside threats, from outside forces, from things that threaten the fabric of our Constitution and our way of life, that we will provide for the common defense. How? That we will provide resources. You know what? That will provide our lives, that will provide our sons and daughters for military service. I have a son who is a Marine. Okay, that's a sacrifice on my end because I don't know what's going to happen to him as he's serving in the Marine Corps. We are going to provide resources, taxes, to provide weaponry and to provide defense systems to protect our nation, that we are going to provide for the common defense, both foreign and domestic. We know that Antifa, which rightfully so, has been labeled a terrorist organization. That is a domestic threat that we must protect from. Next, the next promise is promote the general welfare, that we will work together to promote and live for the good of one another, that our economy will serve one another, our education system will serve one another, our ideology, our community, our way of life will serve one another, that we would all know and gather around what is healthy and good for the life of all. And finally, and this is the most important one, it promises to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. In other words, for future generations to come would enjoy and continue to protect the blessings of freedom and liberty. What is a blessing of liberty? The freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of movement, the freedom of financial trade, the freedom of ideological framework allowed in our mind, the freedom of conversation, the freedom of disagreement, the freedom of debate. All these things are promised in the Constitution, and that is kind of the foundational framework to which I want to talk about. There's two amendments to the Constitution that are up for debate right now, and it's not so much that they're up for debate, it's just the definition of them is up for debate, and I'm going to talk about them. And here's a catchphrase that we cannot fall into. I believe this phrase is a trap, that there are such things as constitutional scholars. The Constitution was written for the average citizen, for the average citizen and layperson to know and understand. It wasn't written as a scholarly work. It was written as a sacred document to protect everyone who would read it. So we, the people, have the right to understand what the Constitution is. We, the people, wrote it. We, the people, will protect it. We, the people, will understand it. Okay? Amendment number 5 of the Constitution says this: no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Circle that, highlight it, public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense twice, put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal offense to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. There's that term, due process. Due process. Let's go back. The amendment number 5, as along with all the other amendments, who does it apply for? It applies to we the people. So any person that is a citizen of the United States, that is protected by the Constitution of the United States, this amendment protects. What does it promise? Due process. Due process. In other words, you cannot be held for a crime unless for a capital crime or a major crime, except under the indictment of a grand jury, or you cannot be held unless there is public danger. And you cannot be arrested twice, and you must have due process of the law. Here's what the immigration protesters are screaming: that immigrants who are illegal are getting arrested without due process. First off, that arrest is the beginning of that due process. What happens is they get arrested. They get taken where? People say, oh, they're disappearing, they're getting kidnapped. No, they're being taken to detention centers. In those detention centers, they will see a judge. That judge will either expedite their departure or deportation, or will expedite the process into a green card or whatever. But first, they must be taken into custody. That is part of the due process. If you break immigration laws, any citizen in the United States, if we break any law, what happens first? We are taken into custody. And when we are taken into custody, the due process begins. We're given a court date, and then we're given a sentence date, and then we go on from there. Due process, they get due process. What they mean by due process is they don't want these immigrants to be arrested or held accountable. All these cities that are screaming and crying out for due process of these immigrants, I'm not sure that they're the most tight-knit communities anyway. They act like they're the most tight-knit communities, that they love one another. Meanwhile, the domestic violence is through the roof. Meanwhile, crime is through the roof. Meanwhile, murder is through the roof. So I'm not quite sure what they're screaming about. I believe that they're screaming about things that they have been conditioned to believe are wrong. So all the immigrants are getting due process. All those who arrested in the United States are getting due process. Are they screaming and yelling when someone gets arrested for a traffic violation or a DUI or committing a burglary or a felony? Are they crying about that? No, they're not crying about that. But they want due process, and they're going to scream and scream and scream about it. The next amendment that is being debated here in our nation is the amendment number 14. Now, the amendment number 14 was written in fact, when it was originally written, it was written to ensure that the Democrats wouldn't re-enslave the free slaves that had been freed, that had been granted freedom after the Civil War. So this is what the amendment number 14 says. Number one, keep the context with which it was written, and then read what it says. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of those laws. The argument that the 14th Amendment allows illegal immigrants citizenry doesn't work in this context. They're screaming about the 14th Amendment, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments of people saying, "Oh, blah 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 blah," whatever you're going to say. Go ahead and leave it in the comment. I'll discuss with you. But all person born or naturalized, we have to define what that means, and we're going to talk about it here in just a minute. And they're subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So, if you are a citizen, then you are subject to the jurisdictions and laws and procedures of the United States of America. It is illegal to be here illegally. It is illegal to be here without being vetted, without a green card, without certain visas and certain paperworks and documents that allow you permission to be in our nation. That is illegal. So if you are here and you are a citizen, then you are subject to the laws. Okay? And if you just because you're here illegally does not opt you out of being accountable to our jurisdiction or laws. No state shall make or enforce any law that shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Okay? We can't make laws that take away our constitutional rights. Now, back then, they were trying to pass laws that kept the slaves enslaved and kept them in servitude. Okay? So this 14th Amendment ensured that the slaves would stay free. That, look, you can't bring them back in some type of internship policy program. You can't bring them back in some type of indebted paid servitude or employment. These people are free, and now they are citizens. This was the context from which it was written. And it should stay in the Constitution to ensure that slavery never happens again. So we have to define what the term born or naturalized means. And I want to discuss a few things with you right here. The United States, I've got some information. Let me just kind of throw it up there. What are the legal requirements to become or be considered a citizen? Now, there's two main paths to become a citizenship. Number one, citizenship by birth. Okay, now this is kind of where it gets gray. And I know Donald Trump has been fighting against birthright citizenship, and rightfully so, and we'll discuss that here in a second. You are automatically, I kicked the camera, sorry. You are automatically a U.S. citizen if any of the following apply, okay? Born in the U.S. or its territories. So if you were born in the United States, you were born in Puerto Rico, Guam, or the Virgin Islands, you would be a U.S. citizen based upon the 14th Amendment. Now, this depends on how you interpret the 14th Amendment. If you interpret the 14th Amendment based upon how the context with which it was written and the understanding that there are policies and due process and procedure, like you have due process, there's due process to become a citizen. And we have to understand that. If you're born in the United States, that is problematic. We're going to talk about it here in a second. Now, if you were born abroad to U.S. citizen parents, you are a citizen at birth if at least one parent was a U.S. citizen at the time of your birth. So if you're born in Germany and you have a parent that's a lawful U.S. citizen, you would be a U.S. citizen. And that parent met U.S. residency requirements before your birth. In other words, they were a citizen and they were a legal citizen, not a resident. There's a difference between a resident and a citizen. If your parent was a legal citizen, a lawful citizen, and had residency requirements, legal residency requirements that they met, you would be a U.S. citizen. Now, naturalization. And that whole citizenship, birthright citizenship gets really, really dicey. We'll talk about that in a second. But citizenship by naturalization, this is important. For people not born as citizens, they can become citizens through naturalization. And these are the basic requirements, okay? Number one, you need to be at least 18 years of age. Number two, you need to be a lawful permanent resident. So you have to go through a process. You have to have a green card for at least 5 years. And if you're married, 3 years. You need to be a continuous resident. In other words, you're not going back to your country of origin, coming back to the United States back and forth between those things. You need to be a steady and stable resident. You need to be physically present in the United States. Okay, so if you have a green card, you can't get a green card and then spend all your time in Amsterdam or in Finland. I know Amsterdam's a city, but in Finland. Okay, here's the kicker: you have to have good moral character, no serious crimes, fraud, or immigration violations. And that's where so much of this has happened. We have all these gang members and all these violent offenders in our nation. And then we have people that are committing fraud. They're getting, uh, health benefits and food stamp benefits and all these types of benefits from the federal government and state government. They're being helped to do that by blue state politicians. And then immigration violations. You have to follow the specifications of what you have been expected to do via the law. Number six is you need to know to be able to read and write and speak basic English. That's important. That is the language of our nation. It's not saying that you can't speak a secondary language amongst your family and friends if you come from a different nation, but we have established English as the uh, main language of our nation. That's a good thing. Not because English is the best language, but because we need a common language. This is common sense. It's not racist. It's not racist at all. It's just good common practice. To ensure domestic tranquility, we need to speak the same language. We need to acknowledge the U.S. government, understand, and pass a civics test. And here's the final thing: this is the whole deal. If you want to be a U.S. citizen, according to these birthright or the Immigration and Nationality Act, the INA of U.S. immigration, their laws, you need to have an oath of allegiance. You must swear loyalty to the United States and renounce allegiance to other nations. So we see all these people with all these flags of other nations: Mexican flags, Palestinian flags, Ukrainian flags, all these other things. The United States, if you want to be a citizen, you want to be naturalized in the United States, you have to swear allegiance to the United States. You can't have allegiance to another nation. This needs to be your nation that you are pledging allegiance to. Now, I'm going to read a couple of the U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act laws that specifically cover citizenship and naturalization. These are key statutory sections of the INA 8 USC that govern how someone becomes or is recognized as a U.S. citizen. Okay, INA 803 defines who is a U.S. citizen at birth, including born in the U.S. or territories, born abroad to U.S. citizen parents meeting residency requirements. Here's the problem with birthright citizenship. If a woman comes across the border and they have their baby here and that baby becomes a citizen, well, the mother is not. So now what do we do? Do you understand the issues? It's not personal. It's not racist. It's not being uncompassionate. It's just, what do we do now? So we have to kind of draw some line and say that's why we've got to end birthright citizenship, because people will come into the nation, and then what happens is they'll have their babies here. The kid is a citizen, the parents are not, or they'll just come into the nation and then have their child here on taxpayer dime, and then the parents will end up staying here, and there was no accountability, there was no expectation put on them. They're just here. And then if we deport the parents, we can't deport U.S. citizens. And so then it becomes dicey, because then there was just a huge uproar a couple months back because the parents had to be deported because they broke immigration laws and had immigration violations, but the kids were born here and they were U.S. citizens. So The left says, oh, they're deporting US citizens, blasts us all throughout the media, but they don't understand the fact that these children had to stay with their parents because they want to keep the family together, even though the parents are being deported back to their country because they're not lawful US citizens. Okay. NA 3311, eligibility, you must be a lawful permanent resident in the United States to be naturalized. In other words, you can't just come in, pick up some residency. There has to be a process there. INA 312, English and language and civic requirements. In other words, you have to understand the Constitution. You have to understand how America runs. We can't just bring people in there with no expectation or accountability. It's terrible. INA 314, conditional citizenship for members of armed forces in certain areas. So if you're serving in the military or maybe of another country, whatever this requires, there is conditional citizenship for you. If you're a part of some sort of armed forces, maybe you come here from another nation and you're serving here, partnering with the United States military, and you will get certain conditional citizenship so that you can move around and operate because you're here for a little bit higher of importance than someone who just, kind of snuck in. It is important that we define what a citizen is. Now, the problem with allowing birthright citizenship, which I talked about, is number one, it will be abused. So you'll have women that will come in and they'll have their babies here, and then they're going to demand their own citizenship so they can stay with the kids. And then it plays on the soft hearts and the overly compassionate, empathetic lefties and liberals that hate Trump and hate accountability and hate law and order. And they'll scream and yell that the parent should stay with the baby and create this big, huge uproar, and the media will get involved. So it's being abused on multiple fronts when the facts are completely ignored. This is going to kind of lean into the kind of the Islamic takeover. Islamic women, Muslim women are having 3 times more children than American women. So what is happening is that religion is growing by birth. It's growing by reproduction. So if you allow women to come in here and have their babies here without any kind of like civics test or any kind of lawful citizenry, wherever they come from and the heritage and ideals and ideology that they raise their kids with, they're going to raise it with here. That's why that's why it's so important to vet our citizenry, because we need to protect our Constitution, protect our way of life, protect our values, because so many countries, most countries, do not share American values, and we need to protect freedom and the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. In other words, generations that come after us. We need to protect the blessings of liberty, the blessings of freedom, freedom of speech, movement, financial dealings, all of the above, freedom of religion, freedom of all religion, or all freedom. We need to protect. And we do that by protecting and vetting citizens. The globalist ideology pushers, the global ideologues, are attempting for this open borders. What's their mantra? No human is illegal. Well, what about the humans who commit illegal acts? We're not saying humans are illegal. This isn't an anti-humanistic thing. What we are saying is that there are laws, and if you break them, breaking the law is an illegal act, and there should be accountability and punishment for that. In this case, we're going to deport you back to your nation, and we're not even going to charge you for it. Okay? You need to swear allegiance to the United States and not to your country of origin, and you need to go through a process in order to do that. But the global ideologues, what they want to do is they're pushing for a one world government. They're pushing for open borders, and they're using this guise of empathy, and they're using this guise of no citizen is illegal, and they're using really Antifa type organizations and socialist type organizations and no kings movements to bring people together around these mantras so they can push their globalist agenda. They want to infiltrate America so they can and invade America so they can destroy it and crumble its It's fabric and ideology from within. And once they destroy America, once they invade America and wipe out the American way of life, they're free to run rampant around the world with no accountability. America is the beacon of freedom and hope and justice and liberty throughout the world and protection. That's what the globalists are trying to do. Why does citizenship matter? Why is it so important in the first place? We've listed a lot of reasons why it's important, but why? Let's kind of narrow this down. Let's get specific on why citizenship is important and why everyone living in the United States must be a citizen. Number one is it protects our American way of life. If we allow anybody to come in unchecked, what's going to happen is there's going to be a clash of cultures, a clash of values, a clash of way of life. And if we create this protected class of immigrants, then the American way of life, American values, American ideology becomes secondary. And we lose our voice. And what happens is there is a growing cultural takeover throughout the citizenry. We see it in Minnesota. What's happening in Dearborn, Michigan? What's happening in Dearborn, Michigan? What's going to be happening in New York? Okay, the American way of life is being overtaken and overthrown. And we're too foolish to realize that this is happening. Creates accountability and expectations. People hate accountability. People hate expectations. People hate anything that has to do with law, orders, rules, and regulations. That we would be so prideful to believe that we don't need expectations or parameters around our behaviors or way of thinking. Boundaries are important because it keeps us protected. It keeps us all moving in the same direction. It keeps what is most important, pure, and holy and righteous in our lives inside the correct parameters and correctly defined. You see pride parades all over the place. And what has happened because of pride parades is we see perversion, we see indecency, we see unwholesomeness beginning to run rampant and to be celebrated throughout the culture. People say, "Oh, it's just an expression." No, it's a surrender and a destruction of boundaries and parameters around what's good, right, and wholesome in our culture. Keeps the blessings of liberty sacred. Freedom is sacred. Freedom is valuable. Freedom is important. And when American citizens understand that, because we don't teach civics in school anymore for this very reason. People who come in from other countries and gain citizenship know far more about civics than the average American citizen because they're not really taught it in school. That needs to change. That's a whole nother thing. But freedom is valuable. Freedom is important. Freedom is sacred. And it must keep that protected. And there's blessings because of it. We're allowed to have as many kids as we want. We're allowed to do what we want on our land. We're allowed to think and speak and do and be and move freely throughout our nation. And those are things we take for granted. There's blessings of liberty. There's health on liberty. There is peace in your spirit and your soul from liberty. Also, citizenship matters because it keeps America a beacon and sanctuary of freedom and protection for the world. We have taken many immigrants over the years, many immigrants over the decades that are fleeing genocide, that are fleeing violence, that are refugees. We take them in. The problem is we take them in and we don't hold them to an American standard. We let them keep the standard of the nation that they came from, that they were fleeing from. And they don't know any better, but we don't hold them to that standard. It's not their fault, it's our fault for not teaching the American way of life. We take them in, we protect them, but we've got to train them and equip them and instruct them on the American way of life. America is looked at as a beacon of freedom. Who hates America? People who hate freedom, people who hate choice, people who hate liberty. It honors those who fought for our nation. When we keep citizenry as an expectation and a parameter and a boundary around anyone who lives here, citizenship honors those who fought for our nation. Because if you're a citizen, you will understand. If you're a well-informed citizen and a well-equipped citizen, you will understand how many young men gave their life for the freedom of our nation in the Revolutionary War, in the Cold War, in the Civil War, in World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, Korean War. How many sons and daughters of America died to ensure that we have freedom? Were the politicians behind it all corrupt? Of course they were. But in the heart of the Americans who gave their life to die for the ideology and belief that they held was most sacred and most important, we honor them. We honor them. Finally, we need to make sure, and this is so important, we the people decide what is citizenship and what is not, who receives citizenship and who is not. The last thing we need is activist judges making these decisions. The Constitution says we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. Judges don't establish the union. Okay, politicians, bureaucrats, they don't establish the union. We, the people, establish the union. They come in and they divide us ideologically so that they become the ones that we turn to for representation because we can't represent ourselves against the people we're divided from. Okay, it's so important that we establish what citizenry is. We've got to quit trusting our politicians. I voted for Donald Trump. Do not trust the guy. As soon as he stepped into office, I don't trust him. I like a lot of what he's doing. I like some of the things of what he's doing, but there's things that I don't trust. There's things that I don't like, and that is exactly how it should be. As a citizen, he serves me to do what is in the best interest of ensuring the blessings of liberty to myself and my posterity. And when he doesn't do that, I'm on the phone to his office, calling him or his people or my congressman, whoever, to course correct what he's doing. I'll do that with every president, every congressman, every governing official, as we should. We, the people, decide. And in this instant, we, the people, need to decide who is a citizen and who is not. And we need to be vocal about it, but we need to understand it at the same time. So what is our action point? Where do we go from here? Number one is we have to get these things into our heart and be willing to stand up and fight for them. This is about we the people. Citizenship is about we the people. It's about American values that we must protect. When we adopt other cultures and other way of life, now there's times to celebrate them. There's time to celebrate other heritage, but now's not the time. See, what has happened is the education system and the ideologues and the bureaucrats have conditioned and trained the people to be embarrassed of American values, that we somehow came into a land and wiped out other cultures and other races to hold our race and our privilege up high. This is not the case. We're applying modern day thought and behavior to a conquest culture, a world conquest culture that happened back in the 1600s. Okay, life was different back then. Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, and this is going to be very controversial, many of the Native and First American people's practices were barbaric and they were brutal and they were worshiping other gods. They were worshiping other spirits. They were worshiping ancestors. And if you look throughout the Bible, the people of God were often given and blessed with land when there were pagan worshipers on that land. Now, am I saying America is in biblical prophecy or anything? No. But what I am saying is this nation was founded so that we could be free to worship God. And when we got here, we wanted to work with and honor the First Nation people. And they're created. And of course, what happens is then we come in and governing officials and evil people came in and created all kinds of problems and war. And that's where the kind of the muddied water is what was our heart truly when we begin to settle here, when we begin to conquest the land for what was good. We are the ones who decide what a citizen is, and we are the ones who decide what the Constitution protects and who the Constitution protects. And this is the final thought. Once we, the people, realize the power that we have, we will get our nation back. When we realize we are the governing officials, We are the governing ideologues. We are the ones who hold the judges accountable. We are the ones who hold politicians accountable. This is not a democracy. It is a constitutional republic. The Constitution is the principles and guidelines for which our nation is ran, and our nation is ran by we, the people. We cannot let these lefties continue to push, this is a democracy, this is a democracy, this is a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. We can never forget that. We must protect our nation. We must hold value, citizenship, and citizenry. Let's hold those accountable. Let's support immigration policies, because when we support the current immigration policies, there's going to be a point where the deportation campaign is over and we can start over, and then we can begin to put our energy into legal immigration. We have to think about the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. 50 years from now, these immigration policies and deportation campaigns will have massive benefit if we allow that to happen. We can no longer stand in the way of the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. So God bless you. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Truth Podcast. Continue to hold these things close to you. Keep your eyes fixed on the Lord. Let scripture and biblical worldview be your foundation for your life, your plot of land that you build your life on. So God bless you. Continue to take a courageous stand for what is true and what is good and what is wholesome and what is righteous. And I will see you next time.